Bryan Mark Taylor is a lecturer, painter, inventor, and world traveler, and a true Renaissance man. It's true. As an artist, Bryan has won numerous top awards of the top nation's most prestigious plein air invitationals, and his work has been shown in museums across the country. He's been featured in Fine Art, Connoisseur, Plein Air, Southwest Art, American Art Collector, Image FX, and American Artist Workshop magazines. Bryan has had many successful one-man shows and has been featured in numerous group shows, including the Coors Western Art, and recently he won a gold medal at the California Art Club's Gold Medal Show. Bryan is represented by galleries in California, Colorado, and Utah, and his work is found in private, corporate, and museum collections around the world. Bryan is sought after as a teacher and lecturer and has taught courses around the country, including the Academy of Art University, Pixar, and the Scottsdale Artist School. He was a featured speaker in the 2012 to 16 plein air conventions and produced a best-selling instructional DVD titled The Master's Mind. As an inventor, Bryan has developed a premier outdoor painting system called the Strada easel, which is used by plein air artists worldwide. Bryan has traveled around the globe carefully observing and capturing nature's everyday miracles. He was born in Portland, Oregon, received a BA from Brigham Young University in 2001 and an MFA from the Academy of Art University in 2005. He lives with his wife and 4 children in Alpine, Utah. And I've known Bryan for several years and painted with his amazing easel as well, and it has become my go-to. But beyond that, Bryan is an amazing individual and a wonderful friend, and I'm honored that he would be here with us tonight and grateful that you're able to learn from him. And I look forward to hearing from him as well. Let's give him a big round of applause.
All right, thank you, Dave. Appreciate that, and grateful for this opportunity to be here with you tonight. Now, I just need to make sure I know how to use this. If you can turn this on for me.
Actually, get this on for you.
Yeah, that'd be great. Okay, there we go. All right, well, tonight I'm going to talk about a subject to which I have world expertise on, and it's me. So, and one of the things that I want to talk about, even though it feels very narcissistic to talk about yourself for 2 hours, or 2 hours. Hopefully, I'll spare you the hour, maybe 1 hour. How's that sound? What I want to do is every insight that I share, my hope is that I'm sharing things that will be helpful to you in your journey and in your process. And I was a student here quite a few years ago. I came here in 1995, and was scared and nervous about my career in the arts. I knew I wanted to do it, but wasn't quite sure how it was all going to pan out. I remember looking out of the window of my apartment and just wondering, staring out the window for an hour or so, just wondering what the heck what I got myself into and what I was gonna do with my life. And so if there's anything I can do to help you in your journey, that's my whole intent and purpose of sharing with you tonight. Okay, so let's get started here. I know a lot of artists really like, they start their story like, oh, when I was a kid, I started drawing and I love drawing. And of course, that's something that is true for me as well. But, it's not terribly interesting, I think, to those early years, I guess, to me, or when I hear other artists' stories about that. But maybe it should be, because, there's those, pivotal moments in your life when you kind of pick up the crayon or you pick up the pencil, and then something kind of magical happens. And that was definitely true for me. I remember in 3rd grade, we had an assignment to draw an animal, and I drew a horned owl. And I remember kind of this little thing going off, kind of, like an electric shock, this feeling of, wow, that was really neat. There's something about that was really quite magical. And, ever since I've hoped to have those kinds of experiences again. And it's interesting, when you have those kind of early childhood experiences, for some reason we just have this desire to want to recreate them again. And so I will kind of come full circle a little bit towards the end of the lecture about how my childhood has really come back to haunt me in a way, or kind of re-inspire me and reinvigorate me. So let's start here. I'm in this picture. I'm 17 years old, and I'm here with an artist. And I actually posted this picture on Facebook because I had no idea. I couldn't remember who the artist was. I knew he was talented. He knew what he was doing, and he was super rough with me. This is up in Montana back in 1995. I was just out of high school, and I was with the Cowboy Artists of America, so I got to meet the whole crew of cowboy artists. You know, they had Native Americans and horses and all kinds of costumes and stuff like that. And you know, I got this first eye-opening experience with this group of amazing artists. So this I found out from a landscape painter up in Montana. He recognized this guy as John Moyer, and he said, he always wears big cowboy hats and tennis shoes. And anyway, it's been fun to find out about that. And you know, he's been part of the Cowboy Artists of America for a long time. So here he's showing me this kind of eye-opening idea that a tree can be represented by a squarish sort of brush stroke. And what I was doing is I was dotting the canvas with these little strokes trying to make leaves. And he said, no, this is how you do it. You got to make it solid, you know, make solid shapes. And so he took the painting that I was trying to do and just in 10 strokes made it 1,000 times better, and just kind of had this magical experience out painting plein air. And so this is one of the kind of early experiences that I had that got me really into or interested in plein air painting. And you know, it's fun that one of the other Cowboy Artists of America, the wife snapped this picture, and so I'm grateful for it, because it's not. I think it's the only picture I have of plein air painting in the first 10 years of actually going out and painting, really. Okay, so this is just later or earlier or last spring, basically painting on the Great Wall of China, and that experience. While I was up there, I was kind of reminiscing or thinking about just my early first experiences painting outdoors, and to be up here in such a incredible historic place, and to have the opportunity to paint before I got swamped by 100,000 Chinese kids. It was just this kind of surreal and magical experience. And this, in a lot of ways, encapsulates my love of art, and also love of the outdoors, of planet Earth, of traveling, of civilization. So there's a lot of things wrapped into this that I think is kind of sums up kind of a big, a lot of things about my life that I really love. Okay, so here, this is on the same trip, and here's a plein air painting I did. It's always hard for me to see these paintings on a screen, just with the color and everything, but anyway, you get the basic idea. So here's a little alleyway, and this is an area in Beijing called the hutongs, and the hutongs are basically the traditional dwelling areas, in Beijing, and these homes are basically for the most part, how they were, hundreds of years, and in some cases maybe 1,000 years old. And so I took my family there, and this wasn't far from our little place. We actually wanted to stay not in a hotel, but we wanted to stay in the hutongs and kind of soak up a little bit of that experience. I have to admit, I was a little wimpy at first. I was like, this is so dirty, I can't believe this, but we kind of got used to it a little bit, and made sure take your shoes off and don't track any of that dirt in there. It was hard to get the kids to do that, but anyway, what I love about places like this is that they are, it's not touristy at all. It's just a humble home, and this is how the majority of humans live. You know, they live in places like this. This is nothing like what I grew up with. My dad was a doctor and had a decent living, and we lived in an area. You know, we have to explain to our kids. We are all of us here. If you get to go to university, you are in the 1%. You know, in terms of worldwide population, and so. But one thing that I've found with places like this, there's kind of a beauty and authenticity about the way they live. And part of it is, you know, you can see there's their bikes, there are underneath that blanket are their rice sacks. You know, they don't have any room inside their house. So, you know, this is where they're putting stuff. There is the little red thing in the painting is actually a fire extinguisher in case, you know, a fire starts somewhere. They have, there's this green thing. If I had a laser pointer, I could point some of this stuff out. But, you know, there's a baby stroller in there. There's clothing, laundry hung up. Basically, somebody's life is just right here in front of you. And I really find that this is kind of a portrait of somebody's life in a lot of ways. Although I don't paint a lot of people, I feel like I am painting a lot of portraits. And what I like to do is paint portraits that, you know, kind of people's living spaces. I think there's something that's really quite interesting and fascinating about that, and in some degree, a truer portrait of. It's not staged. It's kind of in the raw, and it's a way to show, you know, how people live day to day, and I find that really exciting. Now, the process of plein air. Oh wow, amazing! Thank you. Process of plein air is, by the way, I just want to give a little bit of a quick shout out to Dr. Micah Christensen here. He is an expert on all things art, and so we're hoping to have him here at BYU at some point. That's right. Okay, so anyway, this little thing here is, you know, there's the clothing here. There's a clothing line that goes across. This is, you know, baby stroller. This little closet has a lot of their, you know, just tools and things, and it's just fun to see, you know, them coming in and out the door, you know, giving me these strange looks as I'm painting their house. Like, why would you ever paint something like this? You know, this is so not interesting. But maybe, hopefully, they would look at it a little bit differently after doing it. But as far as the plein air process goes, it is not a complete thing. I am not a purist in any way where I feel like I have to create everything outdoors. There's some artists out there, and that's fine. They have this kind of purity where they need to go outdoors and paint, and that's the only way, you know, directly from life. And, you know, I understand that, but I'm not totally into it. And I think that, you know, making paintings that have, you know, that authenticity is important, but I think you have to go back into the studio and digest what you have seen and make more finished work with it. So here's a larger piece that I did based on, wow, so contrasty, based on that initial painting. It's a much larger piece. But also I changed the light a little bit so that it had a little bit more of a dramatic light flavor to it. But that is the process, kind of my creative process, is you go outdoors. That is your area to go and capture things, and you kind of rapidly capture things as quickly as possible, and then you go back indoors and kind of digest and really think about what it is that you want to share about a scene. So these scenes, I call it, they're vanishing landscapes. So places like this aren't going to be around that much longer. They are getting cleaned up. You know, there's a big project. You know, if the government says they want to do something, they don't have to go through a zillion committees like we do here in the U.S. They just bulldoze whatever they want to bulldoze and put things in. You know, for example, the president wanted to have bathrooms in Beijing, and so, you know, thousands of bathrooms, new bathrooms, are in Beijing now, and they're just on every corner, you know, spaced, and just knock a building down or your house down and make you move somewhere else to do it. So that's the kind of change that are taking place, and one thing that's a little scary, I think, is they'll lose some of their culture, And I know that one of the Chinese architects who was in love with Beijing and felt that Beijing could have stayed both like Rome as an ancient city and a modern city and keep its old medieval type walls. Mao didn't think so, didn't think that was a good idea, decided to knock them all down and jailed the guy who disagreed with him. So, it's just different kind of situation there. But that's one of the reasons I felt compelled to get over there, because I know things are changing rapidly, and I feel like it's important to capture these portraits. Okay. Now going back in time a little bit, this painting is, it may be a little hard to convey, but you can see that there's a lot more textural quality to it. It's a lot thicker paint, and so this is the paintings I showed you before are more recent. This is a little bit older painting, maybe about 10 years ago. This is up in Sonoma, California, and this kind of represents more of my thinking during that time. So this is, after I went to BYU, I graduated. I spent a year kind of trying to figure out what I was going to do, and then I went to the Academy of Art University in San Francisco. The Academy of Art University was turned out to be a great fit for me, and there's not a lot of places today that have fine art programs that teach more of the representational type art. Many programs, including the one here at BYU, is more into the more conceptual side of things, the avant-garde. We don't even call it postmodern now. I'm not even sure what it's called. Micah, do we have a word for what the art is? Postmodern? It's just contemporary now, I guess, at that time. It's so fragmented, I don't know if you could even give it a name at this point. But my experience at BYU was actually a little bit mixed. I've told some of the students here, the demos that I've done today, that if I were to do it all over again, I would have been more in the illustration program, because I believe that the skill-based education is, as far as the arts go, that I think is very valuable, and especially for somebody that wants to be a professional artist that's living by creating their work. To have those skills. Now, if you went to certain universities, like Columbia University or some of the Ivy League schools, or a school in New York, you'd have a much better chance of getting into the scene as far as the avant-garde goes. But for a good little Mormon boy, it's a big stretch to get into those sorts of situations, and actually not something that I would really want to do. So anyway, the Academy of Art was a really nice place for me, because it was one of the few schools that actually did teach those traditions and things of the past. And so I fell in love with the California Impressionists, and so this has some leanings towards what they were doing, thicker paint. If you think of artists like Edgar Payne, William Wendt, these are artists that I was very inspired by. And you can see when you go to California why everybody ended up moving there during that time. Either you're on the East Coast or kind of the West Coast. There wasn't, maybe part of it was market, but also I think in terms of the weather. And I've plein air painted all over the country and in many parts of the world. And one thing that's wonderful about California is low humidity. There aren't a ton of biting bugs like the no-see-ums, the chiggers, and all kinds of stuff that is west or east of the Mississippi. I do not envy my fellow plein air painters on that side of the country, and they always complain that we have it super well in California and places like that. But really, Utah, California, Colorado, those are some of the just wonderful places to plein air paint, in part because the weather is so conducive to it. So it was going to the Academy of Art was definitely a great fit, and I got quickly, while I was pursuing my master's degree, I got into the plein air. There's kind of a plein air painting circuit. So what they do is in different cities, they raise money and they put on a show. They invite 30 or 40 artists. The artists come, paint, they get stamped on their canvas and paint for a week, and you're off to the races, and you go out and try and madly create some good work that you will show in a museum or in a gallery, at the end of the week. And then hopefully you've sold some things, you've met some clients and stuff like that. And so I found, the first one I did was in San Luis Obispo, which is now a museum down there, and it's kind of fun. They gave me my first break, and they also invited me to be part of their permanent collection, which is kind of a neat honor as well. So that first one, I'm sure I did some pretty bad paintings. I don't have record of those paintings I did paint or images of them, but I remember selling a few paintings there, and that was kind of this confidence boost to, well, I think I can do this and start pursuing it. So let's move ahead here. Oh. Okay, I told you a little bit about the Academy of Art. I want to go back maybe a little bit further. This is more like the Star Wars thing where we're going to release episodes out of order. So this area is up in northern Utah. It's an area called Garland, Tree-Mountain area. I-15 goes through that place. It's just a beautiful area, and still there are lots of portions there that are kind of untouched. The cookie cutter houses haven't reached it yet. The strip malls and all the other ugly buildings that Utah likes to build. Anyway, this area, around this area, when I was 8 years old, my dad and we'd go on these trips, and not just me and my dad, but on this particular occasion it was me and my dad. Now, there's 8 kids in our family, so it's kind of special to have alone time with your parent. And my dad was really into positive psychology, and you're not going to know who these people are, but some of the older people might know who Brian Tracy is, or Dennis Waitley, or Zig Ziglar, or something like that. My dad was so into that stuff, and actually he'd force us to listen to this positive psychology while we were on road trips. And it was brutal. But to his credit, he turned it off, and he said, "Okay, Brian, I'm 8 years old," and he said, "If you could be anything you wanted," and we're driving just kind of along this road. He said, "If you could be anything you wanted, what would you want to be?" And I said, "An artist." And he's like, "What?" Anyway, he was kind of had no idea, really. 8 kids in the family. I was the middle child, pining for attention, and I think he barely knew I existed. No, I don't know if that's true or not. But he said he didn't know, had no idea I had the interest in it. But anyway, to his credit, he talked to my mom about it and said, "Hey, Brian said he's really interested in art. You should roll him in an art class." And so they enrolled me, 4th or 5th grade, I forget what age that would be. They enrolled me into a Salt Lake Art Academy. And that's where I kind of started my, you could say, formal training in art. And it was actually a really great place to learn some things. And I spent a couple years there. And the only bitter part I have of that pill is there was a clause where they could hold on to any artwork of the young artists that were there if they wanted to. And most of the drawings and some of the sculptures and stuff I did during that period, they have in their possession. And I've tried since to try and get it back, and have been unsuccessful, unfortunately. So it kind of have this period of my artistic life that is, who knows where it is. I feel like I've been a little bit cheated of my childhood a little bit, but sorry, I'm getting bitter. Wow, this is. Let's move on. Holy cow. Anyway, let's go back to the inspiration part. So that really started on my artistic journey and helped me recognize how much I was this kind of love of drawing. And we didn't do a lot of painting that time, but after a while, this person that could also steal my artwork, they started saying, "No, we're going to cultivate you and start moving you in this direction." And I wanted to take this animation class that other people were taking. She's like, no, you're going to go into the fine art area and paint abstracts. I was probably 10 at this time. I was 10 years old. And so I started, I was kind of burnt by that and told my mom I didn't want to go there anymore. And so I ended up going and studying, finding a teacher to learn oil painting. So anyway, I've just, went and found the classes and stuff like that. One thing that's great about today that we didn't have back then is just the access to teachers and to knowledge and stuff like that. There's just so much more that you can do. And honestly, if you think about it, instead of paying for the DVDs and different things, there's so much on YouTube. It's almost all there, really, and you can learn so much from it. And plus, you've got such great teachers here. You don't need to, spend any more extra money on it. But anyway, that's just give you a little background on some of the initial training I had. And one of the people that I studied with was an artist named Harold DeMont Olson, and he a lot of people don't know his work. He sells most of it up in Canada and in other places, but he was a protege of LeConte Stewart, if you know who LeConte Stewart is. So I kind of have this a little bit of a lineage from the LeConte Stewart days, if you know who he is. He's a very collectible landscape painter, painted in the what is the time period? 20s through. He lived till he was like 90, I think, right?
He lived to his 90s, but he started. The earliest work I've seen was done around 1915, and
Okay.
the last work I saw him do was in '89.
In '89. Okay. Wow, that's really interesting. Yeah. So around that time, that's where I was kind of oil painting. I wasn't aware of who LeConte Stewart was. I knew about him probably in 1992, maybe shortly after he passed away. And I learned about him from Harold Olson. So I think there's something about growing up in Utah and the beauty of the landscape here. And a lot of people say that, not just Mormons, but people from all over the world. They come here and just absolutely are stunned by the landscape. It's really quite a special place. And so I think that's why we have such a high concentration of landscape painters here and such a strong tradition here in Utah. And it's one of the reasons, we lived in the Bay Area for about 15 years after I graduated from the Academy of Art University. Didn't really want to leave, but we felt like, after our fourth child, we decided, for kids and stuff like that, to move back. And this was really, Utah and Colorado were kind of the only options, which I thought were beautiful enough for me. Places where I felt that I could be inspired by the diverse range of landscape. And Utah is, it's just quite a special place. So I hope you, and as a kid, I just never appreciated it in the way that I do now. So it's kind of neat to come back. So here are a couple of paintings from some of those field paintings. You can see there's a little bit of, both abstraction, representation in the work. I've been playing the last couple of years with more of a fluid approach, as well as kind of an abstracted approach. Let me go back to this one here. One thing I found, I'm a very kind of an intense person in the sense where I'm always doing something. If I'm watching a movie, I'm either drawing or answering emails or multitasking. I rarely just kind of sit for sitting's sake, almost to a fault. But what I found with the paintings that I was doing, these were all basically straight with no medium, no mixers. It's just all straight paint, right? And I found that there's a lot of drag on the brush, and it was causing so much drag on my arm that I started getting tendonitis and stuff like that. So I had to, make some life changes, and one of them had to be, change my technique a little bit because of that. It's kind of an interesting little tidbit, but I think some kind of good things. I was able to let go of maybe some bad habits along with that, and kind of embrace new bad habits, which is real fun. it's like leave cigarettes and start vaping. No, I don't do either of those. Okay. Now, in Utah, we talked a little bit about this idea of vanishing landscapes. Well, it took me going to China and other places to realize that right here in Utah, we're experiencing the same thing, and you see there's this barn that I just loved, and I went back to look for it, and it turned into a Maverick station somehow. Basically, they just flattened it and became a gas station, and that's what's happening all over this area. Basically, people don't want to be farmers anymore. Do you guys want to be farmers? Do you know anybody that wants to be a farmer?
There are days when art gets really hard and you think about like farming.
Farming would be kind of a nice, yeah.
In an abstract kind of way.
Yeah, I talk to my dad sometimes about that, and he grew up on a farm, and he has no nostalgia for it whatsoever. He likes paintings of it, but he hates farming with a passion. So anyway, this is an old milk farm. This is actually not far from here. It's over by Utah Lake, and obviously it's totally falling down and kind of crumbling. Nature's reclaiming it, and so these are kind of the things I'm interested in. Also here in our neck of the world, that are vanishing landscapes, things that won't be around, and things that they're just not going to be kept up. So, I mean, if you're going to be a farmer today, you've got to own thousands and thousands of acres, and you're going to sit in an office and be on the computer just like everybody else, because your drones and GPS units and things like that are going to water things and pick the crops and stuff like that. So it's a different world we live in. We're going through some rapid changes, and it's kind of fun to capture these things before we get totally bulldozed. So here's another one. This is a centennial farm. In order to qualify for a centennial farm, you have to have it in the family for over 100 years, and you're going to see those kind of disappear. I don't think they'll stay in the family much longer. I was asked the couple the husband had passed away, to come and see this farm. This is near Spring City, Utah. Beautiful area down there, and there's lots of little relics down there if you want to kind of see these kind of beautiful farms. But anyway, the older lady, she's getting close to needing to go to a rest home, stuff like that, and this whole generation is kind of in that same boat. So these are going to be taken apart and sold to an architect that is going to put them into some $1 million home, because this wood has beautiful patina to it, and that's where a lot of this wood is ending up. So this is an interior. This is where the cattle were. It's a milking station. There's an old refrigerator here, the clock on the wall, and just all these boards falling down. There's light coming through the rafters and stuff like that. These are kind of interesting. This kind of remind me of Wyeth a little bit, seeing this kind of stuff. And I much prefer painting things that are a mess and maybe what most people would consider ugly beautiful, or try to paint them beautiful, rather than painting something that's very beautiful in and of itself and then trying to capture just a little piece of its beauty. It's always kind of depressing. You try and capture a sunset and try and get that majesty and grandeur, and it looks like a unicorn would come around the corner, and it can kind of look a little cheesy and stuff like that. And so there's something more, I find, with a little more intellectual weight with subjects like this that are more energizing for me. Here's a sheep farm, and I was trying to think if I got thrown out of this. I got thrown out of a couple of properties. Always ask before you get on the property. I'm not good at that sometimes. I've been in trouble. I've had guns pulled on me. I've been pulled over by the cops. You got to be careful. So especially these days, people are, if you have a camera, they think you're spying on them or something. They think you're part of Al-Qaeda or something like that. I don't know.
Or if you fly the drone.
Yeah, fly a drone or something like that. Anyway, these are a beautiful area, and this guy, I think I made friends with him afterwards. So whenever you find, that's why I go with Dave Dibble now, because he's he's a dignified gentleman, and he knows how to speak farmer. And so from now on, I'm going to go with Dave. Okay, another field painting. Okay, here's an earlier work. Again, this is San Francisco. This is Laguna Street. If you know about San Francisco, whereabouts this would be. This is near the Fort Mason Park area. Love those steep streets. This is a little bit of a nod to some influence from the artist Wayne Thiebaud. We talked a little bit about him today. And if you don't know his work, look him up. He's an interesting blend and one of the few artists that are considered top shelf, sell a painting for multi-million dollars that I actually still, I enjoy his work and find something very intriguing and interesting in it. And it's because he, there's design elements, there's interesting color choices that he makes. Anyway, he's one of the people that I count as influence. And I did a large series of San Francisco scenes like this one, as well as a number of field paintings where I'd go and actually get into small airplanes and do plein air. Plane. Haha. Yeah, anyway, so that was, it's kind of a fun experience, and I've always been flirting with abstraction, so you can see, there's kind of some of the abstraction stuff. And maybe, BYU art program did have a little bit of an influence on me to have, this is my little rebellion right there. Here, you can see more of the influence also, from Wayne Thiebaud to more of the Richard Diebenkorn kind of school of thought, as well as the Impressionists, the California Impressionists. Oh, so here's a little tiny little 8x10. I put this in just so you can see kind of the brush strokes and stuff like that. This is, you can tell that's a movie theater. So a lot of loose painting, there's a magic to it, and that's something that I was really captivated by. And part of it is the mental ability that we have, that humans have, to project and fill in details. For instance, the optic nerve that goes behind your eyeball actually creates a dark spot, and your mind fills that dark spot in with other information, which is kind of an amazing thing in and of itself. And so, the mind has a strong ability to fill in information where it's lacking. And so, one thing I've been really interested in is human psychology, and also, its relationship to what can you get away with, and what can the mind fill in as far as the rest of the details and stuff like that. Okay, here another San Francisco painting. We talked a little bit today about that idea that perfection is the enemy of good, and so when I get into paintings and I like some of this freshness of the strokes and stuff like that, I just put it down and leave it, and there's kind of a freshness there. If anybody knows, I assume you know who Gerhard Richter is. Yes? No? Only the world's most famous living painter. So anyway, Gerhard Richter is it's somebody you should know. Okay, you haven't told him about Gerhard Richter?
No,
oh my gosh. Okay, well anyway, it's okay. You don't even know who he is. But anyway, you can watch a movie on Go Home and on Amazon. I think you can watch it. Maybe pool together some money. It costs a couple bucks to watch his video. It's kind of interesting. Kind of a gimmick too, in some ways, what he's doing. But when you're as famous as he is, you can do all kinds of gimmicks and stuff like that. Anyway, but he does have, there's some wisdom to these large paintings that he does. He has a giant trowel, puts a ton of paint on it, like with a big trowel, and then he scrapes it across the large canvas, and basically creates these interesting patterns and stuff like that. And a curator asks him, so he's like, this isn't quite right. And she says, why don't you make another pass over it? And he said, that would ruin everything. And you know what? I absolutely agreed with him. And the reason why is you stroke the paint too many times, it loses that fresh and beautiful quality to it. The characteristics of paint, it becomes old and tired. So one of the things that I've been learning to do is to fight the impulse to try and perfect everything and let some of these beautiful accidental things just happen. And it's the same thing that you would see, like the stains on the side of the wall. You know, I went to Pompeii, and in Pompeii, you know, they have these just beautiful surfaces where with the frescoes, nature is reclaiming those frescoes and actually adding its imprint and its art on top of those falling apart frescoes, and they become very beautiful. And so to some degree, you know, when I'm looking at surface quality, I'm looking for those kinds of moments in it. Moments that can actually not be created in a direct manner. They have to be, they have to kind of happen in a way. And so you have to let go of control and let go. So there's a certain part of, which is good in life sometimes, you know, just letting go of control, letting things happen. Sometimes, you know, the best trips that I have are when something spontaneous happens. We bump into somebody and it takes us in a direction we never thought possible. Okay, I also did, you know, while I was at the academy, got into the whole cityscape thing, and that's in part why you see on Instagram so many wet, rainy San Francisco street scenes. That's a responsibility of the Academy of Art University. But it's really hard not to get sucked into it. It's so beautiful when it rains in San Francisco with multi-levels and different stuff. There's a lot of energy, and it's really interesting. So I admit I was seduced. Okay, here's another one. Overpass in San Francisco. So this one's actually, this is more recent. This is in Utah. This is not far from Anthony's Fine Art and Antiques Gallery. I'm always, I use this as an example of always, doesn't matter what time it is or, you know, inspiration can strike. And I based this off of a photo I took from the back seat while, maybe it was Howard Lyon and Ben Hammond we were all together or something like that. I think that's how that happened. Do you remember? Were we all together at one point driving home? And we went and got a hamburger after, right? Yeah, okay. Yep, that's it. So anyway, you just never know when inspiration is going to strike. And again, I told you I'm not a purist, and it's okay. And I'm fine with. Unfortunately, you just cannot see the color in this, or just the subtlety. But you know, you never know when inspiration is going to strike. And if I can take a little photo, then that's great. I go home, I paint it immediately, just so that I can remember the colors and the transitions, because an iPhone is so contrasty, it really stinks in terms of the relationship from sky to ground plane. And you know, it's always, like, as an artist, you're always on, always. One of the few places my wife can take me where I'm not on and not thinking. Well, I'm still thinking about art quite a bit, but it's Disneyland, you know, because everything's totally manufactured and staged, and so I don't have that same kind of joy. And, you know, I mean, you can still make compositions and stuff, and I love all the details that they do, every single little detail is thought of to creating that experience, and that's often where my mind goes on every single ride, where I'm looking at, okay, so how are they trying to create this mood, and how are they trying to stage this, and with their costuming and with the things that they're saying and the music and all that stuff. So those are the kind of thoughts that go through my mind. But my wife likes it because I'm not like photographing taking 3 steps and then, you know, stopping and looking. You know, the scout troop was just really annoyed with me. We went down to Goblin Valley. Basically, every 3 feet, stop, take a picture. 3 more feet, stop, take a picture. They put me at the end of the hiking group, so I could kind of be by myself. Okay. Anyway, we let's see. How did this get in here? Anyway, this is a Chinese market. I don't know why this is in here, but I hope you like it. I just threw this in here because this is where I wish I was right now. This is down in Tulum. There's if you've been to Tulum, there's one of the, what do they call them? Those little temples, ruins, stuff like that. Yeah, if, in February, it's the perfect time to go down there. So I totally recommend it. All right, here you saw this painting today if you were at my demos. This is a village, and I had a friend of mine saw that I went to China, and he sent me a New York Times article and said, hey, you ought to check this out. I saw you went to China. Look at this fishing village. So this is the largest remaining fishing village in southern China. There used to be hundreds of thousands of people that lived on the river. Now there's only a couple thousand left. This is the last kind of surviving village where there's quite a few people living in the village sort of way. So this boat is their fishing boat. That's a fishing boat. This is a house. This is basically a mansion. So if you're lucky, you get to have one of these. But most of them are living on these ones on the side here, and they would even have like 3 kids all sleeping on that little boat. And it has this kind of shell-like structure, which is kind of like a freshwater shrimp. They're called the Datang people, and it means egg. And there's 2 theories about why that is. One of them is that egg is what they would pay their taxes in, and they'd raise chickens, and because there's chickens and ducks and stuff running all around the shoreline here, and they said they paid with eggs. The other theory is that these boats kind of, once they had all the things down, that it looked kind of like an egg shape, because what they do is they put them down when it was raining. But I wonder, though, even with this kind of lifestyle and almost kind of primitive feeling a little bit, that if they're not happier being out in the sunlight than being in the factory with 10,000 other people. And after talking to them a little bit with a translator, it seemed like there's no way they could go to a factory if I don't know if they could or not, but basically they had no interest in doing that sort of life. They really wanted to be out in the water. And one thing I noticed about them is their feet were very different from Western feet, because we always have shoes, and so our toes get really kind of guided in a certain way, and their feet were much wider, and they had a little bit different, wider walk too, because they were always standing on a boat, and so they kind of walked a little bit different. It's interesting how environments will shape humans are very adaptable, and animals as well as people get shaped by their environment. So it's really interesting to see that in this group. Okay, this is the first painting I did when I was in China. It was just really exciting to see these old boats, little plein air study, the Chinese fruit market. This town is called 49, just kind of a humble name, 49. It's kind of sad. That's basically just a number. Here's another one of that, the river people. This one, I call this painting the collector. Basically, there's all kinds of fishing gear up here. They live back here. This is where their little kitchen and stuff would be. This is where they would sleep, in this area. So there's kind of an interesting anatomy to all of these boats. And this, you can see there's a city back here. And so a lot of these boat areas are just really close to some new skyscrapers and buildings. So they're going to be removed from the river really soon. And it's bittersweet. Of course, the river is a total dump. Like when you see it's close to the ocean, so the tide goes down, and you can really see how nasty it is in the bottom there. But it's kind of sad, because this kind of way of life, they have songs, and there's a tradition that goes along with this, thousands of years of tradition that is going to be kind of lost along with it. Another one of a river village here. They use a lot of these tarps and stuff, just anything they can find to kind of slap things together. It's really kind of an ad hoc sort of affair. Okay, here's Beijing. I have quite a few of China, another Chinese market. Another boat. Okay, so here, this is going a little bit different direction. This is Cuba. And as soon as Cuba opened, I wanted to be down there to see it before it started changing. It's hard to say what's going to happen to Cuba right now. In current affairs, Cuba and Venezuela are a little bit tied together. And so what happens to Venezuela will affect Cuba, as well as some of the other nearby countries. So I'm keeping a kind of a close eye on what's going on there. It's definitely, if you get a chance to go down, they're warm and friendly people. It's a lot more expensive than you think it might be. There's a really, two currency system that's really confusing. They love to keep it that way so that they can get a little more money out of you, I guess. But one thing that's really neat is these, classic cars. And so you really feel like you are stepping back in time. And I wanted to get down there and to capture some of these things before everything changed. With these cars are super valuable. You can make a better living by owning one of these cars and using it as a taxi than you can as a doctor. So it's just a really fascinating place. Totally falling apart, as you can see, just thousands of wires. I don't know how people can do it without getting electrocuted, but it's in difficult straits. But the people are quite happy for the most part. They find ways to be happy, and go into a grocery store, and all they'll have soap and pasta, and that's it in the entire store. They have to go without quite a bit. And maybe the next month they'll have maybe another ingredient, I guess. I don't know how they do it. Another car. This is a red classic car. Sunset in Cuba. Okay, now we are in Italy. A little plein air painting I did. So I served my mission in Italy, and I think Italy was what really got me this desire to travel to various different countries and places. And Italy was one of those, I felt like I won the lottery being called to serve as a missionary in Italy. And so I've been back many times and going to different parts of the country. It's really quite a beautiful place. You can see why artists from, over the centuries went there and studied and took inspiration from the sunlight there, and I've definitely I've done the same. So this is up in Orvieto, definitely a city to visit if you get a chance, a medieval city, and there are a lot of caves in this particular city. An incredible well here. What I'm after is a lot of just rather than building into a full narrative into a painting like this and adding people and stuff like that, I'm really into more of, again, kind of the abstraction, the shapes, and pairing those with empty spaces, having the dark sky lighting up the building here. Again, I've never fully let go of the desire to have some of these flat, abstracted textures and stuff like that. So I still, I guess, through my whole process, I've always held on to a little bit of that. And again, you'll have some threads, as you're building your career, you'll have these threads of, things that are really, that you'll kind of hold on to, things that are, important to you, that no matter how you change or, go from more fluid style to something that's thick and chunky or whatever, you'll still have these certain mannerisms that are part of your DNA. And that's a good thing. You don't have to root all those things out. But what you do want to learn, you don't have to worry at all about style right now. The important thing is to learn the various elements of picture making, learning about the light and shadow and how, the physics of light. There is a reality, an objective reality out there, and what the teachers are trying to do is help you to see it and observe it and to be able to recreate it and capture it. And so that's a big part of going out on location and painting. This is in Austria, Slovenia. Again, just these little vignettes, little corners of the universe that are kind of interesting, that give a snapshot of the lives of these people. All right, so kind of moving on, I want to talk just a little bit about, instead of all these individual pieces, there's also things that you can do as far as, in your fine art career, and that is, bigger projects, bigger ambitions, bigger things where you want to tell, maybe even tell a little bit of a story. And so John Burton, another artist, a friend of mine, and Josh Clare, is actually, John Burton had kind of the original inspiration for the idea to paint landscapes along the Mormon Trail. And the interesting thing about the Mormon Trail is there is a lot of desolation. I mean, it's desolate for most of the places. There's a reason why not a lot of artists have kind of touched it. But in a way, that's kind of cool, because if you go to California and you paint Point Lobos in Monterey, or near Monterey and stuff like that, 10 billion people. I mean, there's so many paintings of it. It's, if I see another one, I'm gonna barf. But these areas, like, nobody's gonna paint. Very few, right? There's a couple historical things that happen. Even there's a Percy Gray. I think it's Percy Gray. No, not Percy Gray. Darn, I forget his name, but went through as a pioneer and kind of captured some of these places in etchings. And it's interesting to see Chimney Rock, for instance, out in Nebraska. Chimney Rock is slowly shrunk in size. It gets struck by lightning every once in a while. So if you have a time machine, it's a good place to go. Nobody caught that. They're too young. Anyway, the Saints at Devil's Gate turned out to be just this really neat project. And we actually kind of formulated the idea, went out and did it, and then found a venue for it. And it went in the Church History Museum and became a nice exhibition. And that one thing that really taught me is that, say you don't have any opportunities going on or whatever, go out and create that opportunity. And really that has to do a lot with kind of the entrepreneurial spirit. And that's a thread that I'm going to touch on a little bit more, is entrepreneurship. And as far as an artist goes, you need to be a bit of an entrepreneur in order to, I think, to make a decent living as an artist. This idea of being like a Van Gogh type misanthrope style person is really not, it's kind of really lucky that what happened to him, but it's not necessarily the norm. And it's really kind of not something you'd wish on anybody. He had a very difficult life, right? So you kind of really need to grab the bull by the horns, or you can't just be catching fastballs. You need to be throwing a few fastballs as well. And so this kind of project kind of reminds me of doing that sort of thing. So here's one of the paintings from the show. This is one of the larger paintings I've done. It's 72 inches by 90 inches. This is of this evening. This is called Evening on the Sweetwater River. So this painting was part of that exhibition, and it was just nice to have these opportunity, or make the opportunity, to paint some larger works that have some special kind of spiritual and kind of side to it, other than just painting for the market. Because after a while, it gets it's exciting at first, but after the years go down, you've done your show, you've done multiple shows and stuff like that. It doesn't matter what you do. If you do it every day, all day long, it can get a little boring, and you still need to challenge yourself and do bigger projects and things that really kind of take you into new directions and new levels. Okay, so that leads me a little bit to the Strada easel. So this is there's my wife in her pajamas. And she is holding this up because there's no hinges on it. So it's made out of balsa wood. And you can see there's lots of changes to the design, but there's also some things that are still how we have them today in the Strada easel. But this is kind of an early design phase with the Strada easel. Now, one of the things, first of all, I want to say, as far as the success of any sort of business venture or product, From what I've read from a lot of different entrepreneurs, and I've been into entrepreneurship since I was little. We had a lawn mowing business, my brother and I. We also had a series of vending machines that we tried out. We tried all kinds of fun stuff. We'd go door to door, sell candy to the neighbors and stuff like that. So I've always had this love of entrepreneurship and I think, art is kind of like that too. You kind of creating, in a crass way, you're creating a product and then you're trying to find people to buy it. One thing that's good about serving a mission is you're peddling a product that nobody wants, especially if you're in Italy. And so any other product you're selling is way easier by comparison to trying to get somebody to listen to you on your mission. But a big part of entrepreneurship is just timing, right? Is trying to see what the future beholds and getting there at the right moment to be able to do it. And so this is an area which I recognize was very fortunate as far as the timing goes. Didn't know that the plein air movement would kind of take off. There was only a handful of these competitions and interests and stuff like that when I was starting. Especially, when I was 17, I'd never seen anybody paint outdoors before back in 1995. Although there were artists that did it, and obviously there was a movement back in the days of Monet in the French Impressionism. But nowadays, it's really become much more of a robust sort of thing, and it's got quite a presence. And so, one thing that's been fun is to be able to be a part of that and to shape that and to see this go from such a tiny idea over a Christmas break, which my dad, my brother, and everybody else thought was a stupid idea, including my wife's like, I don't want to do this, don't get into this, sort of thing. But I am like I've said to some of you, I'm a jump first, check the water second kind of a person, and but anyway, in this case, I'm glad I took the jump to kind of get this going, and it's been really fun to see people all over the world using the easel and get pictures back from far-flung places like Easter Island or up in the Arctic or just all over the world, Africa, and just to know that you're helping people to kind of create some beautiful things around the world. So in that sense, it's very satisfying. It's not like I invented the iPhone though, and I'm rolling in it. This is a small, humble thing, but nevertheless, it's kind of a fun element and aspect to one's life to have kind of this little facet, right? And so if you do have one of those ideas and stuff like that, one of the things I have found with people is, for instance, like an acquaintance that I have that has tons of ideas. I mean, every time I talk to him, he's like, what do you think about this side? What do you think about this side? And I'm like, just do it, man. And a lot of people get stuck in the just doing it part. And again, that's maybe one of the talents that I have is the jump first kind of model. It can get me in trouble sometimes, but I'm not dead yet. But on other instances, it can be a good thing to make those decisive decisions and go for it, put your money where your mouth is kind of thing. But nowadays, there's so much in the way of entrepreneurship. There's kind of entrepreneur fever out there. You have access, instant access. Social media can be used in such powerful ways, and I'm sure some of you or maybe all of you are using it to your advantage. And look at those as tools. Don't, you can waste so much time on social media, obviously, but if you use it for the right reasons and keep it professional, take the personal part of it out of there completely, is my opinion. Don't give the big corporations any more data than you need to, but use it as this opportunity to test markets, test ideas. When you're throwing an image out there, one of your images out there on Facebook, you're basically maybe getting just kind of this knee-jerk reaction to what people think of it and stuff like that. And that's how I see it, as something to kind of test stuff. But I try and get in and out of it as quickly as possible, just because I know it's a time waster. And that's one of the things we've talked about, is just being really careful with your time, the way you use it, the way you kind of schedule the things that you're doing, being willing to, just like a bad part of your composition in your painting, to wipe it out. You need to take things out. One of the things I recommended, the first thing in class today was throw your TV out the window. And I honestly, sincerely believe that. I haven't had a TV in my home for 18 years. And that was one of the best decisions I think that I made, because mastery, when you choose the path of mastery, you've also chosen not to have the lifestyle that all your friends and neighbors are going to have. It's a very different kind of path, right? And so it requires certain sacrifices. And again, reiterating the idea that I don't feel like I've chosen a path of happiness for my life. Like, happiness is not my goal in life. And maybe so there, you can talk about biblical, joy and stuff like that and all that. But what I'm kind of saying is that I'm willing, because of the path of mastery, and to have something that's maybe a little bit more meaningful, or maybe what some people would call a purpose-driven life, is that that's therein is the satisfaction. Giving up the cars, the massages, the drinks, or the parties and things like that, because I've chosen a path of mastery, and that is something that takes lots of hours and hours and hours of work, right? So like Malcolm Gladwell, he talked about 10,000 hours, right? Well, it turns out that's not really true, but it's okay. Think of it in terms of, there's a lot of hours that have to go into mastery, right? There's no royal road to it, no matter what your talent level is. And one of the things with with the research that has been done, which is quite extensive in many different fields, is that repetitive stress has to go on the mind, because your brain wants to be in homeostasis. Homeostasis is a state of equilibrium where your body can maintain a state for long periods of time. So if you exercise, you push your body out of homeostasis, and then when you're resting, your body will sink back into homeostasis. Now, your mind will also do that too. And so, mastery requires you to repetitively push your mind out of homeostasis into a state of stress. Now, obviously you don't want to stress it too much, but you have to stress it just enough. And you have to do that on a daily basis in order to create the neural fiber work to achieve mastery. That's a little bit of a mouthful, and it's not very, I could be more technical about it, but I'm not at this right now. I might go into it maybe a little bit more later. So here's an opportunity, because of, be willing to, when I got Strada started, after the kids went to bed, from 10 o'clock to 1 in the morning, I was kind of, the initial easels we had made had issues with it, blemishes, and so I was hand sanding every single one, and each one would take a half hour to sand it correctly. And I was doing that at, the midnight hour, late hours, doing that to get this thing started. So some major sacrifice had to occur to kind of get this going. But, then you can have this moment like this. This is my son, Eli. We are at a Plein convention selling the easel. It's been kind of this fun moment, and here's an opportunity. I pulled him out of school because I feel like life experience is the most important thing. If we go on a trip, I'm going to pull him out of school no matter what age he is. Life experience, and get out there and try and learn about some of the ropes of experience. And I recommend that with you too. If you have an opportunity to do something kind of crazy right now, volunteer, go to a different country, all those things are worthwhile experiences. You never know where they can lead. Okay, one of the things we did, I had this idea. Again, I read a lot about entrepreneurship, and I was reading a book while on my way. I was driving to Montana to teach a workshop, and I was reading a book, something about getting ideas to go viral or something like that. And I had this kind of moment of insight, and the insight was that how to inspire people to get better and learn how to paint. And also, this is something to, so that Strada is not just about selling a product, but it's a movement, it's a lifestyle, it embodies lots of different things. And so the idea was that we were going to have this challenge where we're going to push people pretty hard so that they can, achieve greater mastery. So we do this what is called the Strada Challenge. So we do it twice a year, and in the given month that we do it, you have to paint every single day or draw every single day, and you have to do it from life. And you have no days skipped, no matter what. We have people that check on you every single day to make sure you're doing it. And so it's like a jogging group. And so we have over 3,000 members now in a group, Facebook group in Strada Painting and Drawing from Life. If you're into painting and drawing for life, I recommend you be a part of it. We have people all over the world that are doing it. But I've also benefited from it. I feel like I have to be a cheerleader in it and do it myself. And so was super tired this month, had a lot of responsibilities, stuff like that. And adding this on top of it wasn't all that, I was also like worried, am I going to be able to do this? But no matter what, some of the paintings I posted at 11:30 at night, right before the deadline. But I was committed and I was going to do it and be a part of the group. And we had over 400 people finish it on this go around, and it's kind of really neat to see that. And that's the kind of thing, and really what we're trying to convey here is that consistent effort over an extended period of time and a focused effort will help you achieve mastery. And one thing I discovered in this last 30 days is that I enjoy painting still life a whole lot more, where I didn't beforehand. And so I might paint other squishy animals. Like I bought it at an Asian market. So anyway, so I'll show you just some of the paintings I did from it. A little telephone, pickle jar, oranges, egg and frying pan, lantern, R2-D2, dinosaur. Just some random stuff. And basically the idea was, the object, it has nothing to do with the object. It's about how it's lit, right? And that's what you're really after, is just lighting something up and then painting it no matter what it is, and just trying some different things. So it really pushed me in directions that I never thought I'd be interested in. I found out that I don't like painting plastic dinosaurs. But it was good to try it, just so I could say, I'm not going to be a plastic dinosaur painter. Way too much effort for the payoff, I think. But anyway, so let's go back to this idea of mastery. So what happens in your brains that causes mastery? So all of you, we've learned how to drive a car, right? And when we were first learning how to drive a car, especially if you learned how to drive a stick shift, you had to think, okay, press the pedal, shift it into gear, and then slowly let off on the pedal and push the gas, right? And that's really, you really have to focus on it. The car's jerking back and forth. Your dad's swearing at you, Does anybody else have that experience? No, but anyway, that's how rough it is at first, and that's what it's like in painting, because you're juggling 5 or 6 different things simultaneously, or golf. Man, I hate golf. And it's one of those things where how do you get past that, and how do some brains do it so fluidly and effortlessly? And you look at these masters and how they're painting or drawing, it's so effortless and so easy. Well, what they've studied is on a neurological level, what happens is that there's a substance called myelin, and myelin is an insulator, and it insulates around the nerve fiber. And as electrical impulses in your brain pass from one fiber, one neuron to the next, it has to pass through a kind of a cable. And that cable, the more it's fired, the more the myelin forms, a sheath forms around that nerve fiber and actually insulates it so they can travel faster. As an infant, you'll notice it's not traveling as fast when the motor skills aren't quite there, right? Because the nerves aren't firing in kind of a synced sort of way. And as you get older and as you repeat things, you actually build myelin around those nerve fibers. Now, there's a good and bad thing to that. One is you can reinforce bad habits, right? So it doesn't matter if that's one of the challenges I have, and Dave and I talked about this, about even if you have extensive drawing experience as a young kid, some of that experience and some of that effort, and it could be quite a bit, could be building mile in the wrong direction. It can be kind of a rut more than a highway that you're making. And so a lot of times what you need to have is a mentor in order to set you back on the right track, to put the right groove into your brain. And so that's one thing that we need to do. Fortunately, you guys, the students are younger. You haven't had as much myelin built up. As you get older, it's a little tougher, but it's still possible. So this idea of neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is where they've found with Alzheimer's patients that they can actually help them, even though, or MS, people that have MS, what happens, and the reason why they lose motor skill is because the myelin starts to deteriorate in the neural fibers. So anyway, but the thing is we also know that neuroplasticity exists or is part of the brain function until advanced ages. We used to believe that, or scientists used to believe that, when you're about 8 years old, your mind is baked and that's it. But that's certainly not true. I mean, if you look at people like Helen Keller, I forget how old she was when she kind of started to make that breakthrough. But, because she had a great mentor that would, fight her tooth and nail to help her go onto that right path, she was able to do some remarkable things in her life. So and that's why, when your teachers give you critique, it is so valuable. And being willing to accept critique is super valuable. It is the most valuable thing you can get. It's 1,000 times more valuable than watching a master just go off and do his painting or whatever. But just getting the feedback, maybe a master can inspire you a little bit, but you need a teacher that can be with you kind of on a weekly basis to give you that feedback, to kind of put things back in alignment when you're off. And that's what that's what teacher is doing. It's kind of, you go veer off a little bit, they put you back on track. Also, what a good coach or a good teacher will do for you is that they'll give you exercises to kind of strengthen those weaknesses, but what they'll do is tailor the exercise to the level that you're at. So I had a guy come and we did a private week, a week class. I did this a couple of weeks ago. He came flew in from California and stayed with me for a couple of days. And I put an assignment out there of something that he needed to do. Realized it was too hard. There's too much going on, so we pared it down a little bit. We finally ended up with a single egg that I made him paint over and over again. And we'd put different colored pieces of paper underneath the egg to show where the reflected light was. And one of the main things that I recognized that he couldn't tell the difference between, when I was talking about color temperature, he couldn't see the subtle differences in color temperature. So the exercise that he spent a week with me, basically trying to understand where to look for, color temperature. And that was, just a little piece that he could deal with. Now, of course, he needs still work on drawing and composition, a lot of different things. But really, if you were trying, as far as mastery goes, they're just for a couple hours at a time with intense focused practice. That's about what your mind can take in terms of improvement. Now, there's also a performance side of things. So for me, the Strada challenge, painting this stuff, was intense just observation, right? With the, but I also have to, as somebody that has, gallery deadlines and commissions and all that kind of stuff, I still need to paint another 8 hours or so a day because I have to perform, right? But it's always important, no matter where you are in your career, to practice and perform as well as the performance. And people will stop practicing and they'll kind of plateau. And it's interesting, I can be with a painter that I haven't seen for a decade, and they'll be in the exact same spot they were a decade ago, and they've painted, maybe a couple thousand paintings. That doesn't matter though, because they've just been painting them for galleries and stuff like that, but haven't pushed themselves to maybe understand how the form works or value pattern or whatever it is. They haven't pushed themselves beyond it, and that's one thing that's there aren't huge consequences with art, other than the artist might not do as well in their career, but this also happens in the medical profession. My dad has taught over 4,000 doctors around the world, and he, not to scare you guys, but you should be scared. Especially when in his field of expertise in laser technology, it's not as regulated as it should be, and there should be a lot more regulation. But you see a lot of billboards as you're going up I-15. Some of those doctors should not be practicing. Anyway, that's enough said. There, and part of it is fundamental fundamental inability, or the motor skills aren't there. Maybe the book learning's there, but just the fact of the way you're holding things. And the other part of it is, sometimes a car mechanic has better motor skills than a doctor that graduated from Stanford. And there's things that are lacking that weren't worked on, and that doctor or whatever didn't kind of work on those things and doesn't quite have it. And maybe you've been to maybe a dentist or something like that put in a filling that popped out just a little bit later. Just didn't have quite the talent to do it. So, my 8:30. Okay, man, I'm. This is way long. Sorry about that. You guys getting bored? Well, I'll wrap this up. Okay. Now let's dive into the weeds a little bit here. With all of my work that I've been doing with plein air painting, one of the things that I'm really about is growing and practicing, and also recapturing my childhood. I was a Star Wars kid, born in 1977, loved all those early cartoons and stuff like that. And so a little bit of that, that spark that I was talking about at the beginning, that's something that I'm really into, kind of rekindling. And Picasso famously said that when I was a kid I painted like Rembrandt, which I question. Anyway, but as an adult, I'm trying to paint like paint or draw like a child, right? But there's some truth to that, in the sense that you want to recapture those childhood experiences. There's this magic to it. And so with my science fiction work, stuff like that, I'm really interested in going back to that kind of fantastic realm. So there's a couple things that this does for me. It's the abstraction that we talked about before, just the pure beauty of mark making, right? There's a little bit of a narrative concept that's kind of interesting, thinking of other worlds, escapism a bit. And there's also that element of the landscape painting, the atmosphere, the light, the mood, and all that stuff that is part of these environments. So I'll just kind of leave you with a series of some of the paintings, just a few handful of these pieces that I've done based on those ideas. And so there's really two threads to kind of encapsulate what I've talked about tonight. There's this pathway to mastery, right? And it takes a lot of different instructors, teachers, learning this and that as you go through life. But there's also some of that, go out in the weeds time, where you're out in the wilderness trying to figure things out, and that kind of spices things up, and you kind of bring that back into your mastery, and those little discoveries you make out in the weeds will come back in and kind of enhance and be a part of your work. So these pieces have been influential in creating some of the textures in the boards here, or the textures that you find in some of these paintings. That has been a result of my experimentation in these conceptual pieces. And so I really don't have to please anybody. I'm doing these entirely for myself, for experimentation, for learning, for pushing and growing, and that's an important part. And what I try and do is kind of have 90% performance, but then you're, that 10%, I've bumped it up a little bit. It's more 30-70 now, just because I've found it's been so valuable in the last couple of years of that experimental type of stuff that I've been doing, that I kind of think of life in percentages as you're doing things. 90% of my time, take care of the galleries and shows and things like that. But really, you need to do this kind of stuff in order to continue to grow in other ways. So anyway, here's just a couple little elements, and we'll end there. Okay, let's take a couple questions. I apologize for going so long, being so long-winded. Literally, this is the most I've talked all month. Thank you. So I guess we're going to have a mic around.
We do have time for
recording
just a
this.
few questions, and if you want, just raise your hand and I'll bring the mic to you.
I just had a question for your more, the space paintings. How much sketching do you do for each concept?
Very little, and so it starts very abstractly. Use big brushes and lots of wet paint and kind of throw it all around, and then kind of it's just like like an alchemist, stirring in the pot and kind of see if you can see some sort of fortune in there. So that's kind of how I start. However, I do use the principles so in this piece, for instance, there's that feeling of light and shadow, principles of atmosphere, design, look at spatial relationships between large, medium, small shapes, stuff like that, adding texture. So I use all those formal elements that I've used in my landscape painting, but then I'm just trying to, push it into some new directions in terms of mark making and stuff like that. So I do some sketches. Sacrament meeting's a perfect place to kind of get that inspiration. You're sitting there and drawing little sketches of stuff, and that's kind of in the evenings and stuff. I just do little thumbnails. I should have shown you a thumbnail. Yeah, I don't have. Unfortunately, I don't have any right now, but maybe if you follow my Instagram page, one of these days I'll share some of those little sketches and stuff that maybe start an idea for a painting. Yeah, so that's a good question.
So when you find yourself in a rut, kind of like you mentioned, or a quote-unquote art block, what do you find is the best way to kind of re-inspire yourself or re-motivate yourself and get back into the creative process?
That's a great question. There's a couple of things I do, and whether that or not that works for you. I think I go back to actually doing master copies. Go in and walk in another artist's shoes a little bit, and especially somebody that inspires you. And that doesn't mean just flipping through the book or whatever. Print it out or whatever you need to do to actually put it side by side and do a master copy with them. What that does is takes the burden of creation off of you and kind of go into somebody else's shoes to see how they're creating something, and maybe that can get you out of, because oftentimes I think when we have a rut, what we're doing is we're not able to get past, maybe it's just turning the form in the right way and getting that cast shadow correct. I think that can be really important. The other thing that that helps really, even though it's hard, is to getting honest feedback from somebody, and even just having somebody tell you, you want somebody that's fair, or let's see, you don't need to psychologically abuse somebody. You only need to just point out in very concrete terms, warmer, cooler, sharper, softer, skinnier, more triangular, those kinds of comments. There's been research with surgeons where there's a surgeon that, world-class surgeon who uses a clicking thing. Have you seen Jurassic Park? Jurassic World, I mean, where, what's his name, uses the clicker? Chris Pratt, yeah. He uses a clicker. What he's doing is, that's a training tool they use. Well, actually, surgeons use those now, and they just use the clicker, because when somebody's doing a stitch or whatever, and he just clicks to tell him if he clicks it twice if he's doing it right, clicks it once if he's doing it wrong. So no words need to be said, It's just, is it right or wrong? And he's found that is a very effective way to do some teaching. So as far as feedback goes, it's kind of paring you down to maybe a study that you could work on. Take not the big picture, but just focus in on a little thing. And sometimes, master copy can kind of help you do that because you're admiring something they do that maybe you're not able to do, and kind of discovering what that is. Anyway, that's one of the things that I've found regularly that kind of helps me get over that kind of repetitive block, or that kind of thing that I'm banging up against. Yeah.
Looking at where you were and where you are now, where are you really hoping to go with your artwork in the future?
World domination. No. That's a good question. I think that, so like with the concept work, there's nothing harder than putting together like a book that's kind of like a world building exercise. And so I think that it's going to take everything I've got to do something like that. And that's something I want to do. On the fine art side, I have some other big projects that I've been thinking about in terms of the kind of along Saints of Devil's Gate sort of projects. And I think that's the most exciting thing beyond just doing a show of your work. Having a purpose driven, right, is just more interesting in that sense. So, as an artist, I think that's something that's very fulfilling. And so anyway, those are a couple of the big goals that I have is working on those types of big projects.
Maybe one or two more.
If someone wanted,
wait a minute. Did you get a card to have that beard?
Yes, I did.
This is the great Howard Lyon.
If someone wanted to buy a Strada easel, is there a better place to go to get one?
Yes, absolutely. Well, if you're here in the area, just come. You come to our house. We'll take good care of you. Or you can just go online, stradaeasel.com. Thanks, Howard. I'll buy you dessert after this, or dinner.
They really are quality.
That's right. Should we
Well, this
wrap
has
it
been
up?
an amazing night. Thank you so much. If you'd like to shake Bryan's hand and ask him a question, you can stick around for a minute, but let's give him a big round of applause.
All right, thank you. Let me just say one other thing. One thing with artists, in a way, artists are very, as Bill Watterson once said, the famous Bill Watterson. Do you guys know who he is? Calvin and Hobbes, right?
Oh, okay, yeah.
Said artists are very low-grade celebrities. But anyway, one point I'd like to make is that, I mean, you have some great faculty here, and steering you in the right direction. But I'd also just say that if you have a hero out there in the universe that you'd really admire, and just do not hesitate to contact them. Don't just say hi, hello, or I love your work, and just be lame like that. Ask them an important question, a question that you'd really like to know about, and they're very willing to help you. I know that weekly I have people that ask me about different things, even like what kind of turpentine to use, which is kind of an annoying question, but still I try and respond to some of that stuff, right? Don't ask questions like that though. No, I'm just kidding.
Intern to work, because some of our students want to do local internships. If you could, how does a college student?
Yeah, they'd have to interview with my wife though. She's really the gatekeeper. So, and she's really nice. But yeah, we could. There's different things that we could definitely do in that arena. But anyway, I say that too, sincerely. Like, if you have a question, I would be happy to answer, questions or things that you have, or even if at some point came over or whatever to look at some artwork and want to talk about it or whatever. I know these great teachers feel that way too, but I felt in some ways that I didn't have, really that mentor that I wished I had, and so I guess I have a soft place in my heart for people that are also trying to, figure their way in the universe and to kind of help in some small way. And so I think a lot of ours honestly kind of feel that way as well. So don't be afraid to reach out to the professionals out there. And I think that's one thing that's great that you guys do here, to have people come in from the industry that are working professionals. I learned a lot from, I came to the last one where the guy from Blue Sky came, and it was really informative. Yeah. So, all right, thanks, you guys.